When God begins to call you into something greater, the first thing he often does is separate you from the familiar. That separation can feel unsettling because we are wired for connection, for belonging, for community. Yet, in the economy of God, separation is not abandonment. It is alignment. It is his way of pulling you out of the noise so he can tune your ear to his voice. Think about it. How can you discern the whisper of heaven if your life is overcrowded with voices, opinions, and distractions? Sometimes the only way God can shape you is by removing you from the very environment that has shaped you up until this point. And this is not just a biblical principle, it's a psychological reality. Growth rarely happens in the comfort zone. Every significant transformation in your life has required some form of departure, leaving behind certain habits, relationships, or thought patterns. Isolation can feel like loss, but in truth, it is a sacred space of redefinition. When God pulls you back, it's not because he's finished with you. It's because he's preparing to launch you forward. Like an archer drawing back a bow, the tension of separation is what gives the arrow its force. Consider the lives of those God used most powerfully. Abraham was called to leave his country. Moses was driven into the wilderness. David was isolated in caves. Paul spent years in obscurity before stepping into his mission. What do they all have in common? Separation. Their environments no longer fit the weight of their calling. God had to remove them from the crowd in order to refine what he placed within them. If they had stayed in the comfort of the familiar, they would never have become who they were destined to be. Now, here's the tension we wrestle with. When God separates you, it doesn't always look spiritual. Sometimes it looks like people walking out of your life. Sometimes it feels like doors closing, opportunities drying up, or friends no longer including you in their circle. At first glance, it seems like rejection, but in reality, it is redirection. God is pruning away what cannot sustain you in the next season. He is stripping away the scaffolding so that your foundation is built on him alone. But let's be honest, separation hurts. It challenges your sense of identity because so much of who we think we are is tied to where we've been and who we've been around. When God pulls you away, you may feel like you're losing yourself. Yet what you're really losing is the version of you that cannot carry your calling. That old version was good for where you were, but not for where you're going. Separation is not the end of you. It's the unveiling of you. And I want you to catch this. Separation is strategic. God does not waste isolation. In the silence, he sharpens your discernment. In the stillness, he deepens your roots. In the solitude, he teaches you the discipline of hearing his voice above all others. If you never experience separation, you will forever confuse the applause of people with the approval of God. But once you've walked through a season of divine isolation, you learn the difference. You discover that your worth is not anchored in being surrounded, but in being sent. Some of you are in that season right now, and it feels like a stripping. But understand this. What looks like separation is really consecration. God is setting you apart for himself. And the greater the calling, the greater the separation, the more he wants to pour into you, the more he will pull you away from distractions. Don't despise the lonely places. They are laboratories of destiny. So if you feel like God has you on the outside looking in, don't panic. Don't mistake distance for desertion. Sometimes the crowd cannot go where you're going. Sometimes the company that once comforted you would actually contaminate what God is trying to cultivate in you. So he pulls you aside, not to punish you, but to protect the treasure he placed within you. The truth is, if you're never willing to be separated, you'll never be prepared to be elevated. God cannot trust you with influence if you cannot first endure isolation. That's the paradox of the calling. You must step away before you can step up. So here's the challenge I leave with you. The next time you feel God pulling you away from the crowd, don't resist it. Don't fight to hold on to what he's trying to release. Lean into the separation and ask him, what are you shaping in me? What are you preparing me for? Because the very loneliness you fear may be the birthplace of the destiny you've been praying for. Separation is not the end. It's the beginning of something greater. And if you embrace it, you will look back one day and realize that the season you once called loneliness was actually the season God called preparation. When God calls you, he doesn't just give you a title. He gives you a weight. That weight is the burden of responsibility that comes with carrying something greater than yourself. Too often, we want the recognition of a calling without the responsibility of it. We want the crown without the cross. But the truth is, the deeper the calling, the heavier the responsibility. When God sets you apart, he places a weight on your life that will not always be visible to others, but you will feel it every single day. And here's the reality. Not everyone around you is going to understand that weight. They won't get why you can't live like they live, why you can't compromise in the areas they compromise, why you can't just go along to fit in. The reason is simple. Your assignment requires a different level of discipline. When you are carrying something from God, your standards shift. What others can shrug off, you cannot. What others can toy with, you must flee from. It's not because you're better than anyone else. It's because the responsibility on your life demands more of you. Think of it like this. If someone is carrying a feather and you're carrying a boulder, the way you move will never look the same. They can run, they can play, they can be careless, but you have to be intentional. You've got to watch your steps. You've got to measure your pace because you're carrying something that requires care. The weight of your calling dictates the way you walk. And if you try to live like everyone else, you'll end up dropping what God has entrusted to you. Now, there's a psychological depth to this reality. Human beings crave ease, comfort, and the path of least resistance. But purpose will not allow you to live in ease. Purpose disrupts your comfort. It presses on your soul until you either yield to it or run from it. And when God has marked your life, running from it only makes the weight heavier. Jonah tried to run from his calling, and what happened? The storm followed him. Because when God has assigned you something, you can't just shake it off. It becomes part of your very identity. And this weight is not just external responsibility, it's internal transformation. The call of God presses you to grow, to mature, to rise to levels of accountability you might not choose for yourself. It pulls you out of spiritual childhood into spiritual adulthood. You can't afford to be casual about life when God has placed destiny on your shoulders. That doesn't mean you live in fear. It means you live with focus. It means you wake up with an awareness that your decisions carry generational consequences. We see this all throughout Scripture. Moses didn't want the weight of leading Israel, but God still placed it on him. Jeremiah felt too young, but God told him the weight of his words would uproot nations. Jesus himself in Gethsemane felt the crushing burden of his assignment to the point of sweating blood. What do all these moments reveal? That calling is costly. It is not just a privilege. It is a pressure. And you must decide whether you will shrink under that pressure or be shaped by it. This is why you can't compare your life to others. You can't measure your pace by their pace, your path by their path, because their weight is not your weight. God has not called them to carry what He's called you to carry. And if you spend all your time wishing for their freedom, you'll neglect your responsibility. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is accepting that your calling requires you to say, no, more than others do, to endure more than others do, to stand firm when others are wavering. But let me encourage you with this. The same God who gives you the weight also gives you the strength to carry it. He will not put something on you that He does not also equip you for. It may stretch you, it may test you, but it will not crush you when you lean on Him. The secret is to stop trying to carry the calling in your own strength. That's when it becomes unbearable. But when you carry it with God, what once felt like a burden becomes the very thing that builds you. So if you feel the heaviness of what God has placed on you, don't despise it. Don't wish it away. Instead, recognize it for what it is, a sign that God trusts you with something significant. He has entrusted you with an assignment that cannot be treated lightly. And though the weight may set you apart, though it may cause others to misunderstand you, it is that very weight that proves your life has meaning. The question is not whether the calling is heavy. The question is whether you're willing to carry it with God, because the weight of your calling is not meant to break you. It's meant to build you into who God designed you to be. And here's the truth you must carry with you. If you are not willing to bear the weight, you will never see the glory. One of the greatest tests of being called by God is this: are you willing to choose obedience over popularity? This is where separation truly reveals its cost. Because when you decide to follow God's voice, it will often put you at odds with the voices of people. And that's not easy, because deep inside all of us is a longing to be accepted, to be affirmed, to be included. We want to belong, but God's calling will always challenge that desire, because His approval often requires you to walk away from theirs. Think about the tension that creates. To obey God means you may have to stand alone, misunderstood, even criticized. Noah obeyed God and built an ark, while everyone else mocked him. Abraham obeyed God and left his home, even though it made no sense to his family. Daniel obeyed God and prayed, even though it landed him in a lion's den. Each of them had to decide whose approval mattered most, the crowd's or God's. And the truth is, you can't live for both. At some point, you will have to decide whether you want to be liked by people or aligned with heaven. Now, let's be clear. Popularity is not inherently wrong. We are not called to be antisocial or hostile toward others. The problem arises when the need to be liked becomes greater than the call to be faithful. When your desire for applause is louder than your desire for obedience, you've missed the point of your calling. Psychologically, this is what we call approval addiction. It's the compulsion to sacrifice your convictions just to maintain acceptance. But hear me, if the crowd is what you live for, the crowd will also be what limits you, because the same people who cheer for you today can cancel you tomorrow. Obedience to God, on the other hand, is not seasonal, not shifting, not dependent on trends. It is rooted in eternity. When you choose obedience over popularity, you anchor your life to something unshakable. That doesn't mean it won't cost you. In fact, obedience often costs you the temporary comfort of being understood. But it secures you in the long-term confidence of knowing you're in the center of God's will. And let's be honest, this test is hard because obedience doesn't always make sense to the human eye. Sometimes God will ask you to walk a path that looks foolish to others. Sometimes He'll call you to hold a standard that seems unnecessary, to make a sacrifice that seems excessive, or to take a step of faith that others think is reckless. But here's the truth. Obedience is not about explanation. It's about trust. If you wait until everyone understands you before you move, you will never move. Obedience requires you to step out, even when you stand out. There is also a philosophical depth here. Obedience is the highest expression of freedom. Many people think freedom is doing whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. But that kind of freedom quickly becomes slavery to impulse, to peer pressure, to cultural trends. True freedom is found in obedience to God because it aligns your life with ultimate truth. When you obey Him, you are no longer a prisoner to the opinions of others, nor a slave to the shifting winds of culture. You are free to be who He made you to be, without apology, without compromise. And don't miss this, obedience is not passive. It's not just about saying no to sin, it's about saying yes to purpose. It's about aligning your actions, your priorities, and your decisions with the calling God placed on your life. Every yes to God shapes your destiny, and every no to compromise secures your future. The crowd may not clap for you, but heaven takes notice. And at the end of the day, whose applause are you really living for? So when you find yourself at that crossroads, popularity on one side, obedience on the other, remember this: the crowd can give you attention, but only God can give you destiny. The crowd can cheer for a moment, but only God can crown you for eternity. And sometimes, the silence of the crowd is the very confirmation that you're in the right place with God. So let me leave you with this truth. Obedience is costly, but disobedience costs far more. You can lose people, opportunities, and comfort when you choose obedience. But what you gain is priceless. The favor of God, the peace of purpose, and the security of knowing you live for something greater than applause. The question you must answer is simple. Will you chase the fleeting approval of people, or will you stand in the eternal approval of God? Because in the end, the noise of the crowd fades, but the voice of God remains. When God separates you, it can feel like punishment. It can feel like you've been cut off, overlooked, or forgotten. But in reality, separation is God's way of preparing you. He doesn't pull you away to diminish you. He pulls you away to develop you. And the development He has in mind always comes through refinement. Refinement is the process where God burns off what cannot last, so that what is eternal, what is strong, what is pure can remain. It is not easy, but it is essential, because without refinement, you will step into your calling carrying baggage that will sabotage you. Think about gold. Gold in its raw form doesn't look like gold. It looks ordinary, mixed with dirt and impurities. The only way for its true value to be revealed is to put it through fire. And when the fire comes, it doesn't destroy the gold. It reveals it. The heat separates the real from the excess. That is exactly what God does in seasons of separation. He uses the fire of trials, the silence of waiting, and the loneliness of isolation to refine you. Not to break you, but to prepare you to shine in the place He's taking you. Now, here's the psychological depth of it. Human beings don't grow much when everything is easy. We grow when we're stretched, when we're uncomfortable, when we're pushed into situations that require resilience. Separation creates that discomfort. It forces you to confront yourself. It exposes weaknesses you didn't know you had, attachments you didn't realize you were dependent on, and fears that were hiding beneath the surface. But it is in facing those things that you become stronger. Refinement is about stripping away the false so the authentic can emerge. And let's be real, this process is rarely enjoyable. Nobody likes fire. Nobody likes being pruned. Nobody likes being stretched beyond their comfort. But philosophically, you must see it differently. Refinement is not about loss. It's about clarity. It's about God saying, I see what you cannot see, and I'm removing what will hinder you later. If you could see the future weight of your calling, you would thank Him for the refinement today. Because He's not just thinking about your comfort. He's thinking about your destiny. This is why you cannot interpret separation as rejection. If you do, you'll miss its purpose. If you think God is punishing you, you'll resist the very process meant to prepare you. But if you see refinement as training, you'll lean into it. Athletes don't resist training. They know it's preparing them for competition. A soldier doesn't despise discipline. He knows it's preparing him for battle. In the same way, God's refinement is His way of training you for the assignment He has ahead. Look at Joseph. Before he ever sat in Pharaoh's palace, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and locked in prison. Each of those moments felt like loss, but each of them was a fire that refined him. By the time he stood before Pharaoh, he was no longer the naive boy boasting about dreams. He was a mature man prepared to interpret those dreams and steward a nation. That refinement didn't happen in comfort. It happened in separation. And let me tell you something important. Refinement always comes before responsibility. God will never give you a platform He hasn't prepared you for. If He did, the platform would crush you. The weight of influence would destroy you. So He refines you in secret before He reveals you in public. He shapes your character before He elevates your position, because your talent can get you to the stage, but only your character can keep you there. So don't resist the fire. Don't fight the pruning. Don't despise the season of refinement, because every tear you cry, every trial you endure, every lonely night you experience is producing something in you that is necessary for where God is taking you. You may not see it now, but later you will look back and realize that the fire didn't burn you. It built you. And here's the truth you need to hold on to. What God refines, He intends to use. He doesn't waste pain. He doesn't waste seasons. Every moment of refinement is shaping you for influence, positioning you for purpose, and preparing you for impact. So the next time you feel like you're in the fire, don't ask, why me? Ask, what are you preparing in me? Because the season you're in right now is not the end of your story. It's the training ground for the chapter to come.